To introduce our next session, Corporations and Public Trust, Oscar Munoz, in conversation with Richard Edelman, join us in welcoming LAYSHA Ward, Executive Vice President and Chief External Engagement Officer at Target Corporation, and currently serving on the Board of Directors of Denny's Corporation and United Airlines Holdings.
Hello, I'm LAYSHA Ward, Executive Vice President and Chief External Engagement Officer at Target. I also serve on the boards of Denny's Corporation and United Airlines. Target has proudly supported LCDA since its inception. Now more than ever, people expect institutions and companies to play a role in creating a more diverse, inclusive, and equitable society. And at Target, that includes our commitment to our team, guests, and communities. On our board of directors, a quarter of the members are people of color, and a third are female, including 2 Latinx directors, one of whom is Latina and Target's lead independent director. I'm honored to introduce a colleague who I admire and respect, Oscar Munoz, former executive chairman and CEO of United Airlines. During his tenure as CEO and chairman, Oscar played an integral role in transforming the culture of the company, placing employees and customers at the center of the business. He came to United from CSX, a premier freight transportation company, where he served as CEO for several years after holding executive positions at AT&T, Coca-Cola, and PepsiCo. He currently sits on the boards of Archer Aviation, CBRE Group, and Univision Holdings. Today, Oscar will be speaking with Richard Edelman about corporations and public trust. Richard is CEO of Edelman, a global communications firm named PR Agency of the Decade by Advertising Age. Richard has extensive experience in marketing and reputation management, having led assignments with major corporations in over 25 global industries. As the creator of the annual Edelman Trust Barometer, Richard has become one of the foremost authorities on trust in business, government, media, and NGOs. I'm looking forward to this fascinating and timely conversation. Now, please join me in welcoming Oscar and Richard.
Hi, I'm Richard Edelman. Edelman's been studying trust for the past 20 years. We got interested in the subject because of the battle in Seattle over globalization at the World Trade Organization. And in the last year, for the first time, business has emerged as the most trusted institution, ahead of government, media, and NGOs. And it's really on the basis that government is seen as too slow, lacking in competence. Business is seen as both ethical and competent. As my discussion partner today, I have Oscar Munoz, who has just stepped down as chairman and CEO of United Airlines. There's no one who actually has somehow acted in the public's interest more than Oscar in the past 6 years. And so today, Oscar, you and I should have a good discussion and debate about what the expectations are of business in the coming years. So you want to just tell us, just to start, you took over United Airlines. It was really United and Continental still. I remember the Continental flight attendants still wearing their old uniforms, and we are Continental. How did you bring the teams together, and what was your MO at the time?
It's such a vast question because there's just so much to it, and you hate to bring it down to just a couple of trite examples. But indeed, I think recognizing what the issue was at the company was probably at the heart of the conversation. When you're taking over in essence, a turnaround, there's never a shortage of things that are broken, as you might expect. And there's also not a shortage of people and analytics and consultants and everyone that is telling you what should be fixed and what should be fixed first. I think a leadership bit of advice I'd give to all of you as directors is that turnarounds are often hinged on what you begin to do, what you do first in that turnaround. And I think the journey and the process to understand what that platform is going to be is a really important one. And Rich, to your question, my instinct, my heritage, my background, everything that I've ever learned was always to sort of listen, learn from that, and then only can you lead. And so while I had plenty of information and documents and analytics, my first big thing was to, you know what, I'm going to go out and actually talk to the frontline people who actually touch our customers every single day and kind of see what they have. It was an interesting approach because, of course, Wall Street wants to hear more strategic things, cost cutting, revenue growth. Customers want to see what are you going to do. So everybody you have a lot of constituents, but my instinct has always been to sort of listen and then learn. And in the process of doing that, there's many wonderful stories about how that went. But at the end of the day, what we came up with, what I felt as an individual, but what my leadership team came around to find at a particular point in day in my life, but it came to be that it was trust we had to regain, not necessarily from our customers, which we did, not necessarily from our investors, which of course we did, but indeed, in order to begin the journey, we had to first begin with re-earning the trust of our own employees who had lost it over the course of, as you mentioned earlier, just a mangled part of a merger that just wasn't working, people divided, our customers feeling and sensing the pain, not delivering on the financial results. So that's how the trust concept got started in my head, and that was the journey we began.
So Oscar, we were just out of the field at Edelman with a study of employers and employees, and we were stunned by what we found, which is that, in fact, it's not just about the money. It's about the working conditions. It's about how I'm treated and whether I'm listened to. It's also what the values of the company are. And I think that you really understood this virtuous circle of start building trust from inside out. That if we pay people appropriately, we give them respect, and we listen to them, and I walk around, management by walking around, and then the customers are going to be happier, the stock price is going to go up, and you get into that lovely positive circle.
Yeah, no, I think, the Edelman Trust Barometer, which you started, which has been a brilliant guide for us. You've seen it. I mean, you define trust very simple. It's like, do you have a good product? Is it reliable? Do you have some level of integrity? Do you have a certain, and then you have purpose. And I think before the pandemic, if I remember, a lot of the trust was, hey, do you have a good product? And can you get me there on time and all that sort of stuff, which is an important part of a business. But since then, it seems to have switched around where the large portion of it is that old adage, it's not necessarily what you do, but how you do it. I think the how you do it has become a really, really, really important part. And I think one of the things you said, and it's very close and dear to my heart, is the listening concept and making people inside your organization feel like they're actually part of the solution, that someone's actually involved them. There is no greater power in business. I'm telling you, and it sounds overly, dramatic, but I think trust in everything, both business and personal endeavors, is such a critical thing. And when you involve them, I mean, the famous story that I have about my initial travel around to hear from everyone, which sounds like a good idea, but except, towards the end of it, I was overwhelmed with, when I had reams of documents before, when I was coming back from that trip, I had a room size full of information. And I was actually just like, oh crap, what did I do here? Because how am I going to sift through this? And in a fortuitous, wonderful, magical moment that is the basis for the turnaround at United was I went to the front cabin and to the galley, and there was a flight attendant. And my questions that I was asking people were really profound. I was asking like, hey, what's going on, or what's up, or what can I do to help? And the name is, I remember her name is Sue. I just finally got a chance to meet her just a couple of weeks ago, which I'm going to write about. But when I asked her, I didn't say much. I just said, hey, what's going on? She broke down into tears. I mean, physical, real tears. And her phrase, which started the journey, was simply, Mr. Munoz, I am just tired of always having to say, I'm sorry. And for me, that became the profound basis for this concept of regaining the trust of our employees, because we had put all our frontline people in this untenable position of always having to do that. Say, I'm sorry we're late. I'm sorry our coffee sucks. I'm sorry we don't have food. I'm sorry you can't do this, right? And when you do that enough as an employee, you just kind of get a little inured to any new deliveries and new people coming on board. And that was the basis, the concept basis of our sort of journey towards regaining the trust of folks.
So one of the big findings of the Trust Barometer over the last 2 years is that trust has actually morphed. It was historically from top down, from the president of a country or the CEO, or just like that, top down. Then it started to go horizontal about 10 years ago through social platforms, people like me, friends, family, like this. In the last 2 years, trust has gone local. It's gone into my employer and my CEO, much higher than business in general, for instance. And I'm just curious, did you observe this at United, that people were looking to you to speak up on issues that historically businesses stayed away from? You know, whether it's diversity and inclusion or sustainability or even, education or healthcare.
You know, it's an evolving issue. There were some major issues. I think one of the big accounting firms started a movement towards this ethical world. The BRT issued a statement of value proposition that wasn't just about stock creation, but also community and social issues. So the movement has been going on. And I always talk about this because during the last summer, when we had all the issues around, the racial inequality that's in our country and all this surrounding sort of events, I was very pleased to see the corporate chieftains of this country, all our CEOs at these venture events, actually really taking this to heart, and importantly, actually providing proof, not just promise of what they could do. So I've seen it that. To your question of is it expected? It is, I think, incredibly so much more expected. It wasn't just a couple of years ago. I think myself and United were probably a little bit at the forefront with a couple of issues when we were having some immigration reforms, which, as one of Latino heritage, immigration can become sort of, well, of course, he would say something about that. But that's not the point. The issue, when we created at United a shared purpose and vision, which was to connect, to unite the world and connect people to all the things they want to do. And so when, for whatever reason, the government started separating parents from their children and using our flights to do that, I immediately went out and said, we're not going to do that anymore. And so that was one of the first big social issues that we enacted. And of course, the surrounding noise and impact and feedback that you get from this is pretty severe. But again, knowing my company, having regained their trust, involving them in everything that we were doing, allowed me to act quickly in that particular case with, well, certainly rancor from above, but not from within. And so in that way, I think more and more companies are speaking. We've had both pluses and minuses. We've had people speak out on voting rights without knowing things and then getting the backlash, but you're seeing actual consumers, back to your trust barometer and the switch from not just what you do, but how you do it. How you do it is becoming, and if I don't like how you're doing it, you know what? I want to let you know. And while I will hold business from you, I think the brand reputation and damage that it's done as well. So I think we are all learning that we, having a regained amount of trust in corporations, do owe it to the public. Silence speaks almost louder than not. So get on it and do it. And for all of you directors, it's like, in a thoughtful, tactful way, as your companies would do. I think it's important you weigh in because your employees, they're watching, they're listening, and so are your customers.
So, Oscar, the conversation thus far has been really on corporate reputation. I now want to move a little bit to brand marketing. We see the evolution of belief-driven buying, and that, in fact, consumers are exercising brand democracy, that they are voting with their wallets on the basis of whether brands stand up and speak up. And we did a special report on various of the ethnic populations in the United States, African American, Asian American, Hispanic. And my wife, as you know, is involved in the Hispanic Star campaign, trying to make the case for brands to advertise and promote Hispanics as success stories in the United States. We found that, in fact, if you as a brand speak up on behalf of Hispanics, it increases your trust level 6 times over not participating. And I'm just curious, to what extent do you think that brands should be involved directly with advocating for communities?
There are so many companies represented on this call, I suspect, in various industries, whether you're B2B or B2C. And so there's always different approaches. Understanding and acknowledging that the world is changing, that the issues of a diverse workforce, a diverse workplace, and importantly, a diverse marketplace, right? The Latinx cohort in America is largely almost 20% of the population, much larger than almost any other minority. Importantly, their GDP value, the amount of money they consume and generate in this country, if it was tallied up as an entire nation, we'd be the seventh. We Latinos would be the seventh largest GDP in the world. And so the way I voice this conversation to folks is really around, it's not just doing things for diversity's sake and it is just a fundamental business principle. Would you not allocate resources, more recognition, more brand, more awareness, more outspoken on social issues to a population that is increasingly your largest consumer and part of your growth prospects in the coming years? So I don't position, I'm a capitalist person and I love all the soft stuff and I do a ton of that. And I love what Claudia is doing with the hub stars that she does. And I think it's a great sort of project. But there's also this very simple analytical business side angle that, hey, go fish where the fish are. And the Latino cohort in America is a very significant one, loyal, digitally native, growing, young, and all those different aspects of that community. So there's a way of balancing on this. But to your question, it's fundamentally absolutely expected that you take a position, regardless of what you do, and acknowledge that it is a new world out there.
Oscar, also, we found that trust among the Hispanic community is the most manic, actually, that it has oscillated between 2017 and 2021 to be the highest, then the lowest among ethnic populations, and then now back up to the highest. And in some way, business, it's the only constituency in which, in fact, trust in business is questioned. Because maybe business should be doing more on behalf of the Hispanic community, putting Hispanic star on the brands or whatever it is, but certainly putting more Latinos on boards.
Interestingly enough, I think the broader metric is Gen Zs have an increasing level of mistrust or distrust for everything. Guess who makes up the large proportion of the demographic inside the Gen Z population? It is the very absolute Latinx cohort that is so much growing in America. And one thing, if you know our heritage, and a lot of the people on the call will know this, there's very simple things that the Latino community and the familia is all about. And it is about family, it's about loyalty, it's about pride, it's about all those wonderful human aspects that we all have, but it's particularly noted in our community. When you mess with that, when you screw with that, when you do something that doesn't align with that, we can be your harshest critic. And I think that's probably why you see those oscillations. It's like, hey, I'm going to trust you until it bleeds. And really, we will stay loyal to the bitter end. But once you've screwed us for one last time, you will see a giant sucking sound that moves a different way. And again, the population demographics in our nation are growing to a point where the people that are most this youngest and are the next generation of consumers and growth and business and leaders in America are increasingly more Latinx. And you're going to have to deal with this concept even more so. This concept being building cohesion, building brand awareness, building acknowledgement that I'm not just catering or marketing to the same old consumer base. That is a boomer one that's probably beginning to fade in what they do.
So companies increasingly are under scrutiny, and that whatever they're doing, whatever actions they take are criticized in social media, et cetera. You and I worked closely on, and do you just want to reflect for a moment about how you turned that crisis into actually an important opportunity for the airline?
You're talking about the very unfortunately infamous incident of one of our customers being dragged off a plane. As you and I know, Richard, the facts of that situation were that there was not a lot of United employee involvement in it. There was the enforcement officers. There was a different regional airline that we partner with. The situation was caused by all sorts of things. And so those were the facts. I think the things that we learned, and I think this is a lesson for a lot of the people on the call, and I own it, my initial response was crafted by a set of people and forces and individuals inside a corporation that came across as incredibly tone deaf. And that is an understatement. What happened afterwards was important. First of all, not only working closely with someone like Richard and his team to get a sense of this and get some organization, but also for all of you who are leaders and will be leaders and continue to be leaders. There's always this this watershed moment in all our lives and careers where there ain't nobody else around you but you. You and your God or your family, whatever it is, that there's no one else to make the decision about this thing. And what I had to do is go live on TV in the morning, and with all the coaching and guidance that I had, I think the most fundamental thing that was important for me to do the next morning was to do something that was incredibly authentic and genuine, and that I could repeat and that could move us forward. Spinning, blaming others, trying to tell everybody how it wasn't really us, just didn't feel like the right thing to do. The right thing to do was to basically get out in front of it and say, you know what, my fault, stops here. I let policies and procedures get in the way of doing the right thing for another human being, and that should never happen. And by the way, here are the things, and to your question, Richard, here are the things that we're going to do in the next 30 days that we're going to do to improve our customer centricity and focus. So acknowledge that you screwed up, tell them there's no one else to blame but ourselves, and here's what we're going to do. And of course, it's not always going to hit well, and people are going to still push, but there's not a lot more to say. And I'm not sure which was a louder gasp, my team, who expected me to say maybe something different, and of course, the people on the TV side who expected to see what we usually have seen so much in bad cases, where a CEO sitting there going, well, no, this and that and that. And it's like, back to my Latino heritage and principles, that's not what I do and what could I do. And I think the guidance and coaching that I received from your team, Richard, was wonderful. But at the end of the day, you've got to stand in front of the camera and own up to it. But the answer to your question is not only accept what's happened, acknowledge it, and then importantly, what the hell are you going to do about it? And to this very day, when I speak to CEOs around the world who are facing issues, I give them, a semblance of that advice and input.
So, Oscar, one of the challenges in the world at the moment is misinformation. And you know that vaccination rates among Hispanics and African Americans, in fact, lag that of the rest of the country. Part of it is lack of access. Part of it is lack of time to go and leave the kids and be able to get the shot. But part of it's also disinformation. And there are fewer newspapers. There is less interest in actually reading the mainstream media because it's seen as politicized or chasing clicks or biased. So how do you see the role of business in providing accurate information? Is it the role of business?
I think this is it's a point that's continuing to be deliberated, but I can only point to the things that we've been able to do in United from day one on many other topics. The separation of children from their families is one. We had a situation where one of our own pilot's daughter was killed in the Parkland shooting, and so we took away an NRA discount right after that. None of those are popular with a lot of different people. What you saw United do with regards to vaccinations is be the first company in the country, and certainly the first airline, to say we are going to mandate that all our employees get this, and do it early, and do it on the basis of facts and data, what we're getting from legitimate sources. And of course, in doing so, you face, to your point, all the different levels of misinformation. And as myself and a lot of the other leaders went around and spoke to people about the subject, and that's the one thing that we've always done well at United. We had these issues at the past. You don't sit behind a computer screen or a note or an email and send it out to everybody and hopefully everybody complies. No, you get your little butt out there. You start understanding and listening why it is that people have done. And at United, okay, the initial rancor was we're going to lose 20% of our workforce and no one's going to do it. We've made some issues for religious and medical exemptions, but at the end of the day, there was only a handful of people, a couple hundred people that ended up actually finally leaving. But to your question, the conversations about the misinformation was trying to get out there, not to convince people that the information we had or I had was right. It's like, I would say to people like, Richard, tell me what is the issue? And you would hear things, from the crazy conspiracy theories about chips being implanted, from people that are authorities in communities, whether it's religious leaders or political leaders in the community or others, friends and data who would say things that didn't make sense. And then because it's my pastor, I'm going to listen to him. It's like, hey, I won't go into some of the details of some of the things that I heard, But it was just trying to get people to understand. And it's funny when you listen to someone, back to my listen, learn, and then lead. When you listen to someone and you're watching and then you're looking at them and they all of a sudden hear themselves talking. Well, I'm going to get a chip implanted, or God is saying I shouldn't do this, and you just look at them with a look. It's like, okay, if that's what you really believe, you fundamentally as a person, you're willing to put yourself and your loved ones at risk, then I'm not going to try to fight you, but do you hear yourself versus the facts and data? And so at the end of the day, the number of the impact that we had at United was minimal, although we did lose some people, and I'm not proud of any of that, so to speak. But at the end of the day, there's a level of getting in front of it, getting your own information with people face to face that can do that. And that's hard work because we have, 100,000 employees that have been operating in all parts of the world. So it wasn't easy to do that.
So Oscar, one of the hardest parts of being a CEO today is operating between countries. And, one of United's big routes is China. And we have a significant trade tensions with that country. And so I'm just curious, how do you see it forward? Are we going to be able to, as business people, be able to operate in the lovely world of free trade and all of this, or are we going to get to our swim lanes and there's going to be a China area and an American area and a European area like that?
Yeah, I think I worry about that. And I'm always one that has led with diplomacy. At United, we've had one of the best, if not the best, relationship with that country and how we fly back and forth. And we've always enjoyed that. I think at least part of my personal approach in diplomacy is understanding that when you're operating in someone else's country, it's their country. You may not agree with everything, but at least you have to do that. Absent matters of abuse and all the things that that we know about in different countries. So it's not complete freedom, but it's understanding that in a diplomatic way. I think there's a course of action where China and the Far East can begin to open up. I think there's several good ideas out there where we're not going to go to how it was before very quickly. But China have significant companies that have a lot of value to us as Americans and vice versa. And I think one of the first tabs might be for us to allow ourselves to name our top 5 companies and them to name their 5 companies and begin to do some of the international trade that we are. We are a global, the planet is truly global from a marketing perspective, from a business perspective, from a supply chain. And I think it behooves all of us in our economy to move forward in that way, but also to begin to rebuild diplomacy. And, administrations make a big difference. I think the tariffs of the old were thought to be effective. But there's many ways of slicing this, and I think there's a move forward. But I do worry about and the longer this goes, the more people are going to get entrenched in their swim lanes, as you call it. So I think business can lead the way in a lot of that. And you just heard a viewpoint that I have about opening up, and I spend still a lot of time with United trying to help with that.
So Oscar, the COP26 meeting is happening in Glasgow next week, and there are serious indications from the planet that things are not going well. Forest fires, floods in Germany, etc. How do you see this playing out? And I just wanted to give you one data point. We've just come out with a trust barometer we're releasing on Friday, the 30th, that says, in fact, the most trusted institution related to sustainability is government, far ahead of business, and that CEOs are the least trusted spokespeople about sustainability. And does that bespeak some kind of concern about talk versus action for business? And what's business going to have to do to get trust in sustainability?
I heard, and again, this is not a political comment. I listened to all folks across all angles to better understand. I believe in the power of dialogue, and we can disagree, but if we talk long enough, inevitably, like it used to happen in the old days, we come to a conclusion that our constituents, in this particular case, the planet, is an important one, and how do we get there together? And so I heard Al Gore talk about this. In essence, he said, "Do you believe in global warming? Yes or no? You have to do your own, but if you say yes, there's something there. Can you do something about it? And of course, we can all do something about it. The real and crucial question is the third one: will you do something about it?" And I think I brought that into my head and brought it back to United. And at the airline, we're easily the first ones to do a lot of work in this space across the entire globe. We enacted a personal mission to talk to a lot of other CEOs in the industry because we are very large fossil fuel consumers. And if we don't decide that there's something wrong, that we can do and that we will do something about it. So I think alternative fuels is a big angle on creating enough demand. But the planet is speaking loudly, and why people trust government more than corporations, I don't have a lot of that data. I know what I would say to all of the directors on the call in your particular companies. Ask yourself those three questions. Do you believe? Can you? And will you? And I think if we all begin to have that internal questions, just like in our own personal development, we can talk about how others should do things. But if we start doing things ourselves, I will do that. And then I will let the trust barometer take care of that self, just like everything else, in the sense that they'll see that there's actual activity going on. And I think United is a leader in that respect.
So, Oscar, in fact, the government is more trusted because it's seen as the only one that's able to compel business to make the change, and only one to compel consumers to take shorter showers or whatever it is through tax or other ways. But I also want to say that the study finds that half the people think the battle's already lost. We have to flip this. We have to make this something that we can do, that the coverage from the media has to stop being so apocalyptic and actually point to people like United who are switching fuels over time to have. I think you're going to have algae-based fuel or something like this.
No, we have. We've run commercial aircraft, but in that particular case, it takes a couple of weeks to manufacture enough at a much higher rate than jet fuel to fly. We flew from San Francisco to Switzerland a couple of years ago on completely alternative fuel. So it works with a nice blend, but it's again, it's too expensive and there's not enough demand for it. So creating more demand. So I think you're right. Government can certainly mandate things, and there's the old carrot and the stick. I've always fundamentally believed that carrots work a lot better and they're more durable. And again, go ahead.
So we have under 2 minutes. I just want to have one final question, which is, in our trust barometer, we find an elevated level of fears. People are afraid of automation taking their jobs, of declining income, of somehow sustainability issues. How do we flip this mentality away from kind of apocalyptic and, I'm going down in society and therefore I have to, fight everybody, to something where I can be more accepting and more inclusive and I can do better?
Yeah, of all the things that I worry about, I think that could be probably the most. I read somewhere a long time ago that all great civilizations first fall apart from within. And we in America, in our democracy, we are a civilization. And the divide that we see, the misinformation, the divide, the great resignation that you're seeing, again, is real for a lot of different reasons. And we can cite many analytical figures that point to that. I still fundamentally believe, and always have in my own world as a leader of people, that when something happens in my world, in my department, my shop, my organization, I'm responsible. So part of the great resignation is probably a lot of people in corporations say, you know what, you've treated me like shit for a long time, or in their mind, and I'm not coming back to that. I've seen a different approach, a different way, and I'm going to go do that. So I think it's incumbent on us as leaders, all of you as directors, to look inside your company and ask the first question: what can our company do better to attract people? And it's not just about pay. It's about a lot of other things that probably generate some of the level of angst and anger, and that led to some of the great resignation. And so there's just so many different difficult subjects, but that one is a true one. And I think we need to look internally. It's easy to blame others, but at some point in time, we got to look at ourselves as leaders.
So, Oscar, thank you so much for joining me in this conversation. You have, by your career, shown a path to Latinos that they can, in fact, run big corporations and that they can think differently, as you did at United, and brought a community together and delivered great service to customers like me and made people happy when they were able to visit their in-laws. So thank you for everything you've done and continue to do for the Hispanic community, for the business community, and for the world.
Increasingly for the nation and the world. I like to believe, it's a fundamental belief I have, is that I want everyone to have the chance to experience the value of diversity, however it may be, the value of kindness that's been shown to me, and importantly, the value of people helping you set direction in what is a perpetual winds of change that happen in life, right? If I characterize my life and my world, my next chapter is about all making sure that I can enrich that sort of side, and that'll be my purpose at some point. So thank you, Richard, for everyone. Thank you, everybody on the call. Esther, wonderful job that you do with LCDA. I wish you all well, and for all of you on the call and all the leaders and that stuff. So I hope that some of this is helpful to you as you guide and direct your various companies in their endeavors. So thank you.
Thank you.